Hey students, sorry you couldn't be with us tonight. We are looking forward to seeing you back at church the first chance we get. But today we're going to start out with in John chapter 9 where Jesus heals the blind man that was blind from birth. So with this we're going to start digging in. Start with chapter 9 verse 1. I do want to say for everyone that's at home and watching this, at some point I do encourage you to go back. As the Gospel Project asks us to, we're going to be starting, in verses here, go to another set, kind of jump around a little bit. But I ask you to go back and read that full chapter of 9. It's full of great things, good nuggets, good things to build off of as students, as adults, good things you can take out of it the whole time. So let's get started and dig in. We'll start with verses 1 through 7. Chapter 9, verse 1 through 7 of John, and doing the NIV. As he went along, he saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Neither this man nor his parents sinned, said Jesus. But this happened so that the work of God might be displayed in him. As long as it is day, we must do the works of him who sent me. Night is coming when no one can work. While I am the world, I am the light of the world. After saying this, he spit on the ground, made some mud with the saliva, and put it in the man's eyes. Go, he told him, wash in the pool of Siloam. So the man went and washed and came home seeing. Back then, in the Jewish time, and now today, as we go through life and we see struggles, we go through hard times, or like I said, back then there was things that people would see other ones going through hard times, and they always assumed, and we do now, assume that it's based because of sin, because somebody did something wrong, and that's why they're having these struggles today. Jesus, our God, is not blessing them to the fullest because of their actions, and that's not always the case. That is sometimes, as you can see, as you look back in the Old Testament, Miriam sinned against Moses, and because of that, God gave her leprosy. There's many other things that you can dig through. Adam and Eve sinned, the ultimate sin, which is why there's destruction now, still going on today. There's sex outside of marriage that can be STDs can come from. So there are things as you live your life that if you do sin, repercussions from that can be negative. But looking at this story here, that's not the case. You think of Job in the Old Testament. That's not the case. He was living a great life, but yet destruction was come upon him with the devil and God having this conversation. And right here we see the blind man. It was not of any of his doings, his parents' doings, or any of that, as it was God was wanting to use this moment in time to bring glory to him. In Isaiah it talked about that that's one of the miracles that Jesus will do when he is here is going to be healing the blind. And so this is just fulfilling prophecy from Isaiah's time of where Jesus is healing the blind man. So this is something that God had planned for a long time, to have this man go through this just to bring glory to him. And students, I want you to understand, there are times that you're going to struggle. There's going to be times that you're going to have trials and tribulations, and you're going to be sitting here going, "Why, God? Why me?" But yet, it's not necessarily something you've done previously. It's not necessarily anything that you've done to that point to cause that. It's just God is doing work in you and putting you through those fires and those tribulations to bring you where he wants you. Now again, yes, there are some things that you will do that will have repercussions of your own sin, but not all the time. A lot of times God is just working in you. If you can think, if you're sitting here and you're hitting a hard time, you're like, God, why me? And God's looking at you going, just be patient. Just give me time, I'm working. Give me a minute, you'll see what I'm working with. And that's what's going on with this guy here. There is no sin that caused it. And I want you to also realize that we're all different. We're all made different. We're all going through life at different paces. And just like right here, Jesus healed this blind man. There's going to be folks that you come in contact with that are having hard times, and don't always assume it's because of something they've done. Don't prejudge them. Don't just assume it's always the worst. And as we're getting into this, we'll also, the Pharisees said that too. The Pharisees assumed it was sin. And as Christians, we don't need to look at that. We need to show Christ's love through that. And as teenagers, I know it's tough. We tend to try and pile on those that are having hard times, those that don't look like us, those that have other physical defects or whatnot. But I want you to realize that's not the case. You need to realize that you need to show Christ's love through this, just like Jesus did here with the healing of this guy too. That you need to be the one that stands for him and show the love through that. The other thing I want you to also realize in these first set of verses is right here where it says, I am the light of the world. Jesus came here to be the light. It's a dark world. It's a dark time. And if you can think of somebody being blind and it's just, they can't see anything at all, or if you're thinking in your own self, if you're in a room of pitch black and you cannot see a single thing, but yet in a room full of darkness, one little bitty flashlight can make a huge difference. And in this dark world, Jesus is the light. Jesus is the light of the world. He's come here to supply light. He's come here to save and forgive and give grace. And that's what he's saying. He said, I'm here to heal the blind, not just the physically blind, but the spiritually blind. There's a lot of folks in this world that are spiritually blind. And he's here to be the light for them to have sight, to see the true reason he is who he is. So, with all this, Jesus healed the blind man, took the mud, spit on it, rubbed it in the eyes, which if you can think, if you've ever got dirt in your eyes, it hurts and it can cause damage. But God put mud and dirt in this guy's eyes and then told him to go bathe. So this is not some new medicine that you can be healed with. This is actually almost the reverse. So it is a true miracle of how this guy was able to see. He puts dirt in there and then just goes with it. But what happened was he did this on the Sabbath. And as we know with the Pharisees are very legalistic. And so they believe in their works. They believe everything that if you do this, this, and this, you're going to get there. And they don't accept Jesus for who Jesus is. And that's the love and forgiveness that he brings with him. And so they're upset that he did this on the Sabbath. And they're upset with Jesus because Jesus doesn't do what they think should be happening. And so they bring this guy in and they start questioning him. And they're wanting to know what's going on and why, how is he able to see now? And who is this guy? So we're going to skip on down to 29. Verse 29, and it says, we know that God spoke to Moses. This is the Pharisees talking to the blind man. We know that God spoke to Moses, but as far as this fellow, we don't even know where he comes from, talking about Jesus. The blind man answered, now that is remarkable. You don't know where he comes from, yet he opened my eyes. We know that God does not listen to sinners. He listens to the godly person who does his will. Nobody has ever heard of opening eyes of a man born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing. To this the Pharisees replied, you were steeped in sin at birth. How dare you lecture us? And they threw him out of the synagogue. So like I said a minute ago, the Pharisees, they still believe this guy was truly blind from the beginning due to sin, as you saw there. But like I said, they thought they were it. They thought they were the big stuff. And Jesus gave them zero because they were still spiritually blind. They knew the scriptures of the Old Testament. They knew it forwards and backwards. They knew the laws of Moses. As they said there, we know that God spoke to Moses. And so they put their faith in that side of it. And they're following the teachings of Moses. I think in chapter 8 it talks about God spoke to Abraham. So I mean, they're trying to name drop these guys that God spoke to and say we're right because we're with Moses, or we're right because we're with Abraham. And that does nothing. They are spiritually blind, more so than the blind man was truly blind. They are more lost than anything. They believed with their head instead of their heart. That's one of the things we tell our 8th grade guys, Jim and I both do, as we do our lessons and small group stuff. We try to tell the guys, you got to believe with your heart. We've seen a lot of guys come through our class over the last 8 years, I believe it is, that have more head knowledge of the Bible than probably we do. They have more head knowledge of the Bible, of things, what to say, when to say, and how to say, what to do and when to do and how to do. But yet they don't follow God with their heart. And we try to get across to them, it's not what you know. It's about what's in your heart. And the Pharisees, they have it here, but they don't have it here. And a lot of times as Christians, or we claim to be Christians because we have it here. We know we should do what's right. We know we should be kind. We know we should be baptized. We know we should be at church on Sundays and be at church on Wednesdays. And we know we should go on the trips. And we know we should do all that. And yes, we should, and we should follow Christ's steps to do that. But are you doing it because it's here and not just here? And that's where the Pharisees are. And that's where I challenge you as students not to be. Not to have it just here. You need it here, but you've got to be living it here in your heart and working through this. John 5:36, it talks about I have a testimony greater than that of John. This is Jesus talking. For the works that the Father has given me to finish, the very works that I am doing, testify that the Father has sent me. Because again, if you look back over here, it talks about, they're saying he's not from God. But time and time again, Jesus said, the Father has sent me. The Father has sent me. And we know that he has. Because of the things that Jesus was able to do in the life Jesus was able to live, and the resurrection that he did for us. The death on the cross and the resurrection. God sent him to die for us. And he was here to do God's work for our forgiveness. But the Pharisees they could not grasp that. They could not see that. They could not understand that. And because of that, they were, if you follow Jesus, they'd throw you out of the synagogue and say, you're not here. You can't be with us. And so after they threw the man out of the synagogue, is where we're going to pick up right here on verse 35. Jesus heard that they had thrown him out, and when they found him, he said, do you believe in the Son of Man? Who is he? The man asked. Tell me so that I may believe in him. Jesus said, you have now seen him. In fact, he is the one speaking with you. The man said, Lord, I believe. And he worshipped him. Jesus said, for judgment I have come into this world, so that the blind will see, and those who see will become blind. Some Pharisees who were with him heard him say this, and asked, what? Are we blind too? Jesus said, if you were blind, you would not be guilty of sin. But now that you claim you can see, your guilt remains. Now, verse 35, I want to start with that again and say, Jesus, after he'd heard they'd been thrown out, Jesus went out and found him. Jesus is looking for you. If you don't have that relationship with Jesus, Jesus is looking for you. He's waiting on you to say, I believe. He's wanting you to have that relationship and say, I believe. And that's all it's got to take, is to say, I believe. Jesus went and found him, and he's looking for you and wanting you. He's knocking on your door, and all he wants you to say is, come in, I believe. And that's what this guy did, and he fell down and worshiped him. And the Pharisees, still with their blinders on, is like, what? Are we blind? And Jesus keeps putting them in their place. And Jesus knows what to say and when to say and how to say it, just to let them know, yeah, you are. Again, you believe here, but you don't believe here. You want to follow the laws, but you don't want to follow me. And Jesus just digs that in. But I go back to the question of, with Jesus, do you believe? That's the question I want to ask all of you. Are you a Pharisee? Or are you the blind man that doesn't really know Jesus, but you want to, and you want to believe? Are you the one that comes to church every Sunday, and you're here all the time because your parents make you, and you know the Bible because you've heard all the stories, but yet you don't really care? You're not that worried about it. Or maybe you are one of those, and there are several in this group that know Jesus as their Lord and Savior, that knows Jesus as their Christ, and they live it every day through their heart, through their actions, and you can see it evident. But if you're not that, I want you to check yourself. First off, is Jesus your Lord and Savior? Or do you just think He is? Ask yourself that and figure that out. One other thing in these set of verses that I didn't discuss, but I do want to close with too. John 9, verse 25. The Gospel Project that we're working through, it didn't include this one verse, but as I prepare my lessons, I watch different videos and I talk to different folks on the phone and about different things of these lessons. And so I made a call to one guy, and he said the one thing that he does love in these verses of this story is verse 25, and I do want to share that with you before we close today. And it says, he replied, this is the man that was blind, talking to the Pharisees. And he replied, whether he is a sinner or not, I don't know. One thing I do know, I was blind, but now I see. And that's John 9, verse 25. I'm going to read it again. Whether he is a sinner or not, I don't know. One thing I do know, I was blind, but now I see. Students, as you go through life, as you start school back hopefully soon, the next month or two, there will be other students, other kids that truly don't know who Christ is, and they're going to have legit questions. But there's going to be some out there that are going to be like the Pharisees. They're going to know a little bit, and they want to trap you in something. And so when you get these questions, whether it's legit or not, and somebody asks you something that you don't know, it's easy and it's simple to say, I don't know, but I can find out. I don't know, but I'll get somebody that does, and we'll get it figured out together. But you always need to turn around too and go back as you're having that conversation. Just don't say, I don't know, and walk off. But you need to say, I don't know, but let me tell you what I do know. I believe in Jesus, and Jesus is my Lord and Savior because of, and always go back to your testimony with that. Talk about what you do know. Talk about things that Christ has done in your life. If it's something that you don't have a clue about, it's fine. Say, I don't know, but we'll find somebody that does. But let me tell you why I believe what I believe. And always go back to what you do know and what your testimony is. So, in closing with these verses, again, are you the Pharisee? Are you the blind man? Are you one of the Jesus disciples that do know who He is? Are you somebody that's blind that wants to know Jesus, that wants to be able to see? Are you somebody that leads it with your head and not your heart? Or are you out there plugging away like the disciples and loving Jesus with every bit of your heart? Thank you for listening today. Sorry we can't see you at church. Hope to see you back as soon as possible. Thank you.